Hello, welcome to my presentation on the Managerial Behavior Diary, where I examine my current supervisor, whose official title is Plant Supervisor, and he oversees just under 20 employees. We are located in Watford City, North Dakota, which is unofficially referred to as the Bakken region, where there was an oil boom that lasted about 6 years from about 2009 through 2015 before oil prices really tanked and the entire industry went through another major cycle. The background information to this position is very important, and it's really a regional issue. Specifically, there was a running joke where if you had come to Watford City, North Dakota, and you had a pulse, you can make six figures. And that actually is true, and I believe the same thing is going on in West Texas now, near the Midland, Odessa area, where there's another energy boom and wages are extremely exaggerated. Employee turnover is very high. Employee retention is difficult, even for very specialized and senior positions. So these are all issues that our region faces. It's not just specific to my current company, and I've worked for several similar companies in the region, so I can attest to this. But every company in the region is facing employee turnover issues, or more specifically, employee retention issues. And I use that as the major metric as far as how to judge the efficacy and successfulness of a leader in this area, because to maintain employees and ensure that they have tenure with the company is difficult, and not many leaders or even companies are successful in doing so. The wages are extremely exaggerated in the Bakken region. I myself make over six figures and I only work half the year. I'm currently working a 7 day on, 7 day off schedule, so it's very nice lifestyle for me. Um, One of the issues that brings up, however, is the fact that there are plenty of jobs to be had. So if you wanted to go and leave your current employer tomorrow and find another very similar job that probably pays more, your chance of success is very high. So to keep employees, it's not necessarily just about the wages or the benefits, as are usually all very good with many of these companies. It does take leadership into account, because when everybody's wages are so exacerbated and so high, what is the reason to leave a company? Is it because you want a better schedule, perhaps better benefits, maybe? I think it really boils down to the fact that people leave employers and companies here due to management. You don't quit your job, you quit your leader. However, let's jump into some of the behavioral tendencies that my current supervisor displays. And I'm going to start off with more day-to-day interactions, just um, normal interactions that you would see them doing. And the major theme throughout all this is going to be the lack of day-to-day interactions. The plant supervisor takes a very hands-off approach. We are a very autonomous group, my peers and I, the plant technicians. There's currently 15 of us, including myself. And the supervisor really lets us accomplish and tackle the issues as we see fit. He doesn't provide very much guidance. He doesn't provide very much social or supportive behaviors. He's very, very hands off. And a very good example of this is 3 months after taking a position at my current employer, I was getting a little bit worried because I had not heard from the supervisor. And in my own mind, that makes me think that it was setting off red flags, and I was really worried because I hadn't heard from him. So I was curious if my performance was less than expected, or maybe just, it was bad and I wasn't doing well. However, when I went to the plant supervisor and asked him how I was doing, he said that if you don't hear from me, that's a good thing. So he's very hands off. Like I said, very you can do. He expects you to do your job, and there have been multiple times and occasions where I will go a month, if not maybe even longer, without ever even communicating or interacting with my supervisor. I show up and do my job, and at a bare minimum, that's what's expected. Given the lack of directing and supporting behaviors exhibited by the plant supervisor, I think it's safe to say that he takes a very delegating approach, considering the competencies of all the plant technicians is very high. He doesn't involve himself in many, like I said, the day-to-day interactions are minimal at best. But when we get into more abnormal situations or non-routine functions, you see his behavior start to shift. And I think that's the biggest example of why he takes a situational approach is, for example, we recently had a complete plant shutdown and depressurization, which is a very unique event. It had never been done before this occurrence. And his leadership style shifted from delegating to directing. And I think the biggest reason for that was because no one had ever done it before. The competency level of all of the plant technicians went way down. No one had ever done it. There's very unique aspects of shutting down a gas plant and potentially very dangerous situations. So since the competency level of all the technicians went down, I think his approach kind of shifted to a more directing as far as this is what needs to be done. Here's what group is going to accomplish this task or this task or that task. It was much more directive. And for the situation, that was a good thing. And I think it led to a very successful turnaround and shutdown. Nobody got hurt. We did it in our timeline that we had expected, which was our goal. So overall, it was successful and it worked. Speaking about the less frequent interactions, however, with the supervisor, his hands-off approach for the most part is a good thing, but there are cases where I do believe that he does need to step into his leadership role and either do better at directing or delegating, whatever the case may be. But there was an example that I wrote about I where I believe that he really should have stepped in and, like I said, directed his subordinates to do a specific action, and he did not, even though he was aware of the situation. And it was a glaringly obvious example of where he should have stepped in. Apparently, when I asked him about it, he was even frustrated himself, yet he chose to take no action. And I tried to get as much information from him as possible about it because I wanted to understand what his train of thought, what his mentality was on the situation, and I'm still left questioned about it. It was just very hands off, let it ride kind of approach, and I don't think that was the most effective given the situation. It could have worked out to be a lot worse, and luckily it worked out successfully. But I don't think that it was the best because my interpretation of it after the fact is still I recall it as a negative experience. But still, for the most part, we see that he takes a hands-off approach, and that it's very situational based, which is it is what it is. But it gets a little more interesting too when we consider leader-member exchange theory, in that our my peers, so the leader subordinates, have a varying degree of age and experience within the industry. Our youngest employee is 21 years old. Our oldest employee is about 56 years old right now. So there's a huge range of people who lack experience, people who have experience, people who want career progression, people who just want to show up and do the contractual minimum of the role. Now, where leader member exchange really comes into play is he does the plant supervisor does it congruently with the individual members. So not only is it a situational approach and a very adaptive approach, but he's also very adaptive to the individual. So his expectations for each of his subordinates could be wildly different. And it seems like for the most part, the more senior older employees are just happy to show up, do their job, and leave, and that's all that's expected of them. Whereas some of the younger employees, like myself and some of my younger peers as well, we have higher expectations, and he expects us to do more and do better and kind of take on more responsibility in some of the more difficult projects. And a good example of that is with our new plant that's coming online, our phase 4. It's the fourth expansion of the current gas plant, and the plant supervisor designated 4 employees to head up the expansion, or the commissioning of the new plant. So turns out that the 4 plant technicians that he chose also happen to be the 4 youngest plant technicians that we have at the plant. And I don't think that's coincidental. I think that the expectations are higher for us, and I think that plays more into leader member exchange than it does situational or the adaptive leadership, just in that he sees us as more, for lack of better words, go-getters. We have higher ambition. We have a higher drive to do more than just what is bare minimum expected in these roles. And I believe that's why he chose the younger members for that role. Now, the greatest thing that we can do for examining the efficacy of the plant supervisor and his leadership, I believe, is to look at the turnover rate of employees or plant technicians specifically, because that is the biggest issue that any company faces in this region is employee turnover. And I like to use that as the metric of success up here, because there are multiple cases of people in huge groups of employees where we're talking groups of 10 or more employees leaving and quitting on the same day to go to another employer. So I like to use employee turnover as the main metric for success, and I think it's appropriate for this situation. Now, given that the employee turnover, specifically for plant technicians, is so low, I think that I can say that the plant supervisor is doing a good job, and he's an effective leader. His approach is working. If it wasn't working, I think the employee turnover rate would be higher, because my current employer has some of the highest wages and best benefits out of out of the company peers in the region. So people are not leaving for more wages or higher wages or better benefits or better schedules. They're leaving because of management, and we just don't see that at my current employer. What we see is employees that have 5+ years experience with the company, which is an extreme rarity in this region, unfortunately. But it's kind of the name of the game and some of the local issues or regional issues that we face here. So going based just solely on employee turnover, he's doing a phenomenal job. We've only had 1 employee quit in the last 2 years. I think that's great. We are expecting to lose a few more employees because of a recent schedule change, whereas just a few months ago, I was on a 2 week on, 2 week off schedule. That got changed to a 7 day on, 7 day off schedule, and several of our employees actually live out of state. Some of them live down in Texas even, and they commute up here to do their 2 weeks on and then fly back home to do their 2 weeks off. So with some of them, it's just not possible for them to buy 2 plane tickets per month, unfortunately, just for expenses. So um, it may increase, but I don't think that the schedule change is the plant supervisor's sole decision. I think that's actually coming from management levels above him. So his hands are kind of tied, so to speak, with that. So I don't put that on him either. But one of the more interesting things that I did do with the managerial diary was I questioned some of my peers about how they feel about the effectiveness or how well the plant supervisor is doing. And the answers were varied, but for the most part, they were overwhelmingly positive. There wasn't really a lot of negativity, and the only negative responses that I really saw were they stem more from the employees' own desires and own ambitions as far as them wanting to progress their careers. So what I really saw was the people that had maybe not the most positive things to say. They wanted more training. They wanted more, career orientated path, so to speak. And I think that's a little bit more. Some of it was more transactional as far as employees wanting to perform X amount of service or experience and then almost get a guaranteed promotion. And I don't really think that's realistic, but I think it shows that some of the employee base is ambitious, and the The flip side of that is I saw the more senior and experienced employees actually say the most positive things. And I think that's because they show up, they do their job, they go home, and they don't hear from the employer their entire set of days off. And that's exactly what they want. They're happy. For the most part, it's a pretty low stress job 99% of the time. And they're content with that. And I think that's the biggest thing because the leader has to be adaptive and has to take a situational approach, like I said, because you have these older senior employees who are extremely happy just showing up and doing the job. This plant supervisor needs that. But then you also have younger, ambitious employees that are very career orientated and they want to do more. And for the most part, they're happy. They understand that they have to kind of pay their dues, get the requisite experience before they can move on and move up. So overwhelmingly, I saw a positive response, and they're not nitpicks, but there's little things that maybe could be better as far as communication level. But like I said, for the most part, the employee base has nothing but good things to say. So between the employee turnover and the employee base having a positive interpretation of how the leader's doing, I think that it's a very good case to be made that this is one of the most successful leaders in the region, just due to those two facts alone. So to summarize, I think overall the plant supervisor demonstrates that he has a very adaptive approach to leadership. I think it's most applicable to the situational behavior or style of leadership, and he adapts to not only his individual employees, but he adapts to whatever problems or obstacles may arise. So I think that given his extremely adaptive approach, coupled with the fact that we have such a low employee turnover and the response that I got speaking to my peers was positive, I think he is an effective leader. And I think that given his, like I said, adaptive style, it works for him. So there are a couple of other theories or behaviors which may be applicable, but overall, it varies so much. And like I said, the day to day interactions are very low. It's very delegating style. But when it needs to change, the leader, the plant supervisor, does change his leadership style in order to be most effective. And so far that I've seen, it has worked. And like I said, overall, I don't know how else to gauge his efficacy other than the fact that the employee base is happy and people are leaving. And I think, given, like I said, the employee turnover issue in the region, I think that overwhelmingly that he can be deemed a good leader.